outfit? Should I wear a shirt with a collar? Get ready for a deep dive into academia. I got my stopwatch here.
You can give us a presentation through some of his past works, and then
Yeah.
we'll close that out and then walk around and talk about his current show a little bit. So at that point, if you have questions, just feel free to dive right in.
Yeah, so this is kind of a generic talk about my past work, like Matt said, tailored to sort of some of the themes that enter into this show. So we'll just sort of knock all that stuff out, and then we can walk around and we can talk about this show. So if you have questions about anything I'm talking about as we go, feel free to please ask. You know, I'm giving this to illuminate everyone here about what I've done, and I've lived with it a lot, and you haven't. So, you know, I have proximity to it, so it's hard for me to know what interests people or confuses people. Or
It's all over. Is that part of the program?
yeah. All right. Sorry, I'm gonna have to use some cards too. Okay, so I'm gonna try to go through it so we have time to go through the show too. So my background is in photography. These photos were all taken in teenage years. Is this thing focused too? Everything's focused? Oh yeah, okay. Perfect. So pictures of my friends, and also experimenting with infrared photography and, you know, portraits, abstraction, just kind of playing around. So I started doing that when I was a young kid. I think I had a Brownie camera.
That's real film?
All that's film, yeah. So I was already into collage and photography and playing music and doing all kinds of things as a teen. And I wanted to go to art school or go play music in New York or something, and neither of those things worked out. So I ended up going to St. John's College. It's a very small liberal arts school in Maryland. And it turned out to be a really good thing because it's an interdisciplinary school. You go and study a fixed curriculum. You read philosophy, literature, science, math, language. Every year you start in chronological order and you go through, and everybody reads the same things and takes the same classes, and it's all seminar based. So it's very much like, let's read a text and then let's talk about this extremely confusing text and how we're all confused and maybe trying to get to some sort of understanding. And, you know, everybody brings their different experiences and backgrounds to it. So, you know, as far as like anything formative prior to when I started sort of calling myself an artist, I would say this is probably one of the most formative thing. Because I didn't go to art school and because I went here, I have no respect for boundaries. Sorry, not the way it sounds. Yeah, formal boundaries. You know, in math class, we'd talk about Greek, we'd talk about literature, we'd talk about the Bible. In philosophy seminar, you talk about biology. So there's just no, maybe it's just the liberal arts education. There are just no boundaries. Everything is connected. And I think that carried over to my art practice. I work in any medium I feel like, for better or worse. There's even a painting in here, which I never thought I would show a painting in an art show, but there you go. Good, keeping it moving. So, okay, so after I went to college and I'd worked for a few years, I was a temp at IBM, among other places. And I'm only putting this in because it seems like this sort of incredibly prescient, advanced thing for me to be thinking about when I'm not even calling myself an artist in the late 90s, which is having a consultancy. So I made a fake website on GeoCities, fake because Imperial Services didn't exist. And the idea was to offer ideas and get paid for it. And this is still a work in progress. I think I did it in 1998. And it's still like sort of, I feel like it's behind a lot of the things I do, especially the corporation. So let's just sort of put that on the back burner and it'll come out later. So I'd say the first significant body of work I did were called Photons, and that's a term that Rauschenberg came up with for sort of these stacked vertical photo montages. And I think I did a lot of photography in my 20s, and I got a little bit bored with it. Single images sort of in a frame. So I think what I ended up doing with these, which were, this piece, for example, is 5 feet high and this wide, sort of stood off from the wall in the way that these aluminum prints do. So I think of these as film strips with a lot of the intermediate scenes removed. And I think what I was trying to do was reintroduce some motion and activity into still images, because the still images started seeming just really dead to me. I mean, the good way of saying that is they capture a moment. The bad way of saying it is like, it's just this moment, just like you sort of nauseously presented with over and over the same moment. It started to seem strange. So I think these introduce some activity, some narrative, and there's another one. And then something like this, I found these are all found photos that they all happen to have the exact same thing, which was someone who was really excited about the helicopter, and they took a picture and it felt like it was really close, and then it was that big. So I thought that was kind of a funny way of saying someone really noticed something, but formally it's just like you can hardly see what it is. And the fact that 5 different people took photos like this, I thought was interesting. The next big project I did, I tend to work in big series and projects that, like the corporation, that have all these different branches. This is called 140 Ways to Make a Cassette Unlistenable. So you may be wondering, okay, there's these photo montages that make sense, they're very easy to grasp, and then there's this weird thing where there's a list, but what I think my photography background has me doing every time I embark on something is, the first thing is there's a blank slate. I just sort of look into the world like, okay, world, what's going on? I look for that blank slate, and then when I start noticing things, I put things together, and then there's sort of this very receptive process to it, and then I'll do something with it. So to me, this is the same thing. We had a few boxes of tapes that an old tenant had left. They were like noise, experimental, live tapes, but they'd been outside, and what are you going to do with them? So instead of just throwing them out, a friend of mine and I said, let's think of all the ways we could destroy these. So we just sat around. We thought of 140 ways, and then I went about sort of carrying them out. I think this was with a pry bar, and then freeze it, melt it on a dashboard. And there are various ways of presenting them in these little vitrines. Some were presented as sculptures, depending. Like here's one where it's hidden inside a tie. I kind of sewed it in a tie. Jar of peanut butter. AOL. Everyone remember the AOL mailers? You'd get the thing and install the software.
Dan, what are those letters?
Yeah, those are the best.
So here's a letter I wrote to a document destruction company that uses these giant, amazing things that you could just like throw phone books and VHS tapes, and they just grinds them up. So I said, hey, how much would it cost to just do one tape? I know you guys usually deal in higher volume. No response. I wrote a letter to NASA because they had a thing where you could propose a project. I said, okay, I need 2 things from you. I need you to send a tape into a black hole, and then I need you to send one into orbit. And I was like, so if you guys could just go ahead and do this, I'll send you the tapes. Send me, anything interesting that happens when you do this. And then they sent a very nice form letter saying, projects have to be proposed in a very particular way. It was a very bureaucratic response, but I got a response. All right, where are we here? So anyway, the other thing I'll say about that is process. So I started thinking about process, and it was very interesting to me that I was able to make other things do a process, like you freeze it or you melt it. But it was great to kind of just set something going, and I didn't have to do anything, and then I sort of made a documentation of it. But I continued to do photo stuff and also make sculptures, and there's a text piece. Some of them were trying to bring photos out of 2 dimensions, and then also start working with sculpture. Again, photography just started to seem limited in a way that wasn't very interesting to me. So again, these things will pop up in this show. You'll see similar things. And that same year, I started doing a drawing a day for a year, which is harder than it sounds. If anyone tried to do that? 1 drawing per day for a year. Try it. It's really hard. It's hard enough brushing your teeth every day, much less trying to come up with an idea and draw it. But it was great because I just got me into the habit. It's great when your mind bottoms out. You do it for 3 months. You're just like, I don't have any more ideas. I don't want to do it. I don't care. And then you start coming up with really interesting things. And so, like 24 days in a row, you create a whole, sort of monochromatic series of prints based on Schubert songs. So Schubert's someone I'd studied a lot at St. John's, and this is where this starts to come out, where I think I'm creating a sort of dialogue responses to another, so it's sort of like a collaboration across the ages or something. That's how I look at it, as just a way to spur ideas. So I listen to a song, again, it's the receptivity. And then if you go to the next one. So then I made a portfolio of prints, so it's kind of a book, and I showed them as, single prints too. Anyone know who that is?
Anthony
Robbins. Tony Robbins, self-help guru. I found a complete cassette version of the Personal Power series at a thrift store. And I got to thank Tony Robbins for, self-help people get a bad rap. I think 80% of what Tony Robbins is saying is stuff that Aristotle was saying. It's just sort of common sense stuff about, well, Aristotle didn't talk about confidence and wealth management and stuff, but purpose, purpose, yeah. But Tony Robbins, I would believe, is singularly responsible for the thing that I will be known for after my death, which will probably be on my tombstone, which is the next slide. All known metal bands. So All Known Metal Bands is an alphabetical listing of every heavy metal band name I could find. There are 51,000 names, 300 pages, presented in alphabetical order with no other information. If a band name was used more than once, it gets repeated. So that leaves you with, I think, the most popular name of all time, Legion. I think there were 24 bands named Legion. So don't use that for your next band, Todd.
How did you find the bands?
Mostly the internet. I don't think it would have been feasible without the internet, but also, you go to the Amoeba metal cassette bargain
Lots of trips.
bin, Amoeba magazines, but mostly the internet, different websites. And
How did they go?
so what I was going to say is this I think grew out of a even more harebrained idea to take a cup of sand and with a microscope and count the grains of sand. Like, how many grains of sand are in this thing? So this seemed to me also like a kind of, I'm going to get every single one known to him, and it's like, no. But the process of trying to do that and trying to wrap your head around this, for metal, it's like a subculture that many people aren't aware. They're like, Slayer, Metallica, and that's it. But to be able to wrap your head around this thing that's really like visible to some people and invisible to others was a really interesting thing. And Tony Robbins comes into this because instead of it just being a list in Microsoft Word where I go, oh, haha, I did that, and you throw it in a box, I submitted it to publishers confidently, manifesting, and it was published, and it was very popular, and it got reviewed. So here also, I would say with the cassette project metal bands, we start to see a split, if I can zoom out of myself for a minute, into things that are more text-based, not so visual, and things that continue to be interested in shapes and forms. And these kind of come together at various in projects, but I think they're related. We'll see. You guys be the judge. These are called characteristics, and what they do is try to extrapolate human symbols from natural symbols. So could you just go back to the previous one? This is, I think, a Cambodian character, and this is the shape of a snake that lives in Cambodia. And so the next one, obviously male, very male, military shoulders with an M. And then the next one. So 3 strokes is the Chinese character for 3 and other things. And then I learned that a 3 is just sort of a cursive way of making 3 strokes. So I'm trying to sort of really get to the essence of symbols that are very close to something that you would observe. And I think that this plays into the next series, I think. Okay. Which are responses to Blaise Pascal, who was a 16th century theologian, philosopher, mathematician, kind of polymath. So this is someone I studied at St. John's, and I don't know why I responded to his thinking. I mean, it's not only interesting, but it's really like kind of Christian apology, meaning, why you should be a Christian, like what faith is, why you should be faithful. The most famous, his most famous thing is called the wager, and that boils down to believing in God is a matter of faith, and so it's better to, if you're placing a bet, it's better to bet that God exists than to bet that God doesn't exist by not believing in God. So it's this sort of like logical flim-flammery about why you should believe in God, because the benefits of believing, if you're right, are better than the bad things that happen if you don't and you're wrong. So I don't care how true that is or not. It's just very stimulating so it's that kinds of thinking that you can go through. So I started creating sculptures and little paper models, sculptures out of paper. This was a plywood cutouts that I sort of pegged together. I'm going to stop there. So this is a real stage of playing with these ideas and creating pieces. And again, that last one where it's made out of wood, but it's 2-dimensional, but it's 3-dimensional is really like also, I keep resisting the 2-dimensional. So this is sort of the first phase where I'm really playing with it. And then the next phase, I create plywood cutouts. So this one was about that big. And they're all red, gray, and black. So I made these cutouts. I spent a lot of time painting them, trying to get them perfect, but I couldn't get them perfect for a variety of reasons. Part of me is also not a perfectionist, so I'm not sure I really wanted them to look like a Ferrari, just like perfect. Part of me is like, so, and I didn't have anywhere to show them. We had just moved to Portland so Alexa could go to grad school. So I decided to just put them out in the world. I thought more people would see them on this busy street in Portland. And also just not have them be part of a gallery, just have them be these weird, mysterious objects that popped up on this building. So that's how I installed this version of them. You can go to the next one. And then later on, I'd check in on them, every once in a while. And since living here, I've looking Google Streetview and start to see, what's happening with them as people started putting faces and then also just sort of painting tags around them, which was really interesting. So there'd be a row of these with one giant word that someone had painted. So I thought that was cool.
Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Yes.
Was the plywood there already?
Well, the bare plywood, what I installed them on was, yeah.
Okay.
It was just a boarded up building and it was there for month after month and nothing happened with it, So I finally ended up presenting them in this very room in here, when it used to be a drawing gallery, as paper. So, and I try to figure out why I went back to paper from the 3D forms. I guess I felt like doing them in this way made them all sort of equal, and it really, if you can't make an object perfect that needs to be perfect, then it becomes distracting. So I guess I wanted these to be really like pages from a book. Again, trying to use paper in different ways. It's not just flat. All right, moving on. So this year, 2009, I started working in an office. In the office that became the corporation. Inspiration for this show. I've been a house painter and done various other things, and I realized after working all day and then working on art at night that you really need to work on art full time to become really good at it. And I still believe that. It's very hard to do with a day job. So I thought, make an artist a millionaire. I become a millionaire after work at a day job. I can devote myself to art. So I started this project. The first iteration was I wanted to get a million people to each give me a dollar. Millionaire, you can argue with that. Give me a dollar, I want to be a millionaire. Okay. I thought it would be easy as pie. People would argue, well, why should I give you a dollar? And I'm like, I've already spent way too much time trying to convince you to give me a dollar. Just forget it.